Hi Fiends! So, I wanted to do a quick video on something a little bit different because this controversy, even though it was like a month or so ago, I cannot get it out of my head. And although I am primarily using this channel for gothy shit, I want to do more history stuff and more stuff about pop culture in general, so the last in the series of, well, latest, shall we say, in the series of the Assassin's Creed games, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, is set during 431-ish BC in Greece during the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. And there's been a controversy in the last month or so because they released a DLC that sort of straight-washed the player character. Odyssey was praised initially for its for doing a couple of things very, very differently to the previous games. It's a lot more RPG-like, from my understanding, and you not only have the choice to be either a male or female character, but you could also romance characters of both genders. I mean, I would say all genders, but I'm not sure there are any trans people in the game. The DLC kind of retconned that, partly because Ubisoft realised that in order for their crazy bonkers sci-fi nonsense to work, the player character would need to have a child. So they decided to have you forced effectively into a straight relationship, and initially it gave you an achievement for doing this called growing up. That has now changed as far as I know, because that you can't imply that non-straight relationships are immature. Now, the thing that's driving me up the wall about this, and has been driving me up the wall about this since this controversy started, is that not only is it straight-washing your character, it's also straight-washing the society in which this universe is set. And it's driving me mad because it would have been so easy to have a historically accurate way around this, because guess what? 5th century Greece, gay relationships happened, but, this is the ancient world. The notion of things like gay and straight and even, sexuality as we think of it today, a bit like the way we see gender roles today, very, very different. For most of the ancient world, the notion of gay and straight was not a thing. It's really something that comes in kind of after Christianity takes over. If you look at pretty much most ancient cultures pre-Christianity that I can think of, having a relationship with somebody of the same gender was not completely unusual, particularly for men. But generally speaking, in ancient Greece in particular, it was very, very normal for particularly men to have relationships with other men outside of their marriage, but to still be married to a woman in order to reproduce. Now, if you're looking at 5th century Athens in particular, women didn't have much agency. They were kind of viewed in a similar status as slaves or animals. Unfortunately, 5th century Athens is pretty misogynistic, but it was completely normal for men to have relationships outside of their marriage. This was just what you did. It was perfectly normal and acceptable, and in fact desired of high-class men to have a extramarital affair with usually younger men. We won't get into the muddy depths of pederasty in ancient Greece, but you know, this was kind of normal. And you may be saying, yes, but Odyssey is not set purely in Athens. The characters you're playing are Spartan. Well, that still stands with Sparta. Sparta were just the Spartans, sorry, were just as keen on extramarital affairs between men as the Athenians. Basically, the way Sparta had a weird sort of coming of age ritual where young lads would go out into the wilderness and survive for a period, and it was usually a time for them to experiment with other men. But with Sparta, you also have a lot more freedom for women, and so it was not unusual for women to have affairs with other women. And of course, you know, prior to this, if you look back 100 years before this, affairs between women in other places in the Hellenic world, the Greek world, were also common. I mean, this is why we have the word lesbian, because of Sappho. She lived on Lesbos, and she wrote a lot of very beautiful poetry addressed to another woman. So it's so frustrating to me that they could have very easily put in a couple of lines about, you know, you still having an ongoing romantic relationship with person of your choice, as well as having a marriage of convenience in order to breed. And part of the reason this is frustrating me so much is it's kind of implying that not only do your choices as a player and a character not matter, but that non-heteronormative relationships within the ancient world are an afterthought and didn't really happen, which is completely not true. You know, the notions of sexuality that we have today are very, very different to most of the ancient world, up until Christianity takes over, and then we get into the sort of Dark Ages and things. Most ancient cultures viewed sexuality more in line with gender norms than with, you know, who you're sleeping with. It didn't really matter to them who you were sleeping with, as long as you stayed doing what your gender is supposed to do. So you have stories of older older men being active partners, as in tops, basically. And that was considered fairly normal. Being an older man who was a bottom, less so. That was considered more of a thing that women did. Likewise, women who were slightly too masculine would also be sort of considered in the same vein, to the point that, you know, Norse culture, Viking culture, had a specific word for it. They called it ergi, which is basically behaving like the other gender. So you get a lot of things in mythology about Odin and Loki being ergi because they do things that are considered womanly. So, you know, Odin disguises himself as a woman at several points in the myths. He also practices magic, which is, in Norse culture, was considered a woman's role. Likewise, you know, Loki did both of those things and also gave birth to children. And then you have some things about even Freya, the goddess of love, being considered ergi because she was a bit too forward. And you see similar things in a lot of ancient cultures. You will, if you've read much mythology from ancient Egypt, there is a similar sort of aspect of being active partner being manly. So there's a really bizarre bit in one of the myths, I can't remember which one, but there's a really bizarre bit where Set tries to rape Horus as a sort of one-upmanship thing, but he doesn't actually manage to. And this is like a big sort of gotcha moment, which is weird to modern eyes. And you see a similar thing in Greece. Obviously you see a similar thing to an extent in Rome. Rome has slightly different views on the I mean, Roman writers are, generally speaking, kind of prudish. You have a lot of Roman writers sort of complaining about how terribly decadent some of their emperors were, and that sort of thing. And one of the things that they considered decadent was being a bit too Greek, i.e. being more effeminate or sleeping with other men. So I find it really, really frustrating when any media ignores that part of history, because it implies that the notions of gender and sexuality that we have now are constant, which they're not. I mean, even, you know, you look at other cultures outside of the West today, and they also have very different views around gender and sexuality and things. I mean, you look at, you know, just thinking about gender, you look at the amount of cultures who have a third gender. You know, India has a third gender. Various Native American cultures have an option for somebody who is effectively non-binary, or trans, or, you know, again, all of these words that we have around gender and sexuality are specific to us. It's not necessarily a one-to-one switch with other cultures. And perpetuating that myth is actually really damaging, because it makes people who are non-binary or, you know, not straight feel like we're not normal, and we are. We are a constant factor in history. So it's not only, you know, a case of representation, it's also a case of representing the past in a way that is socially accurate. And in this day and age where we've got, you know, people complaining to high heavens about black people being in historically set games, or women being in historically set games doing things that people think they didn't do, which they did, it's as important to include things that really were in history in historically set things. So that's my rant, and I'm going to go and do something else. I'm hoping to do more history-based videos very soon, so I hope you enjoy